Hello, dear students. Myself Indrayani M. Patil, lecturer of CS Department, SGP and Trust Polytechnic, Associate. So today we are going to do revision on Network Security and Management Subject 6th unit. That is the last unit of NSM, Security and Law and Internet Governance and Electronic Mail Policy. Let's see the important question from this unit. The question number 1, explain information technology, that is also called as an IT Act 2000. The IT Act covers cyber and related information technology laws in India. So the IT Act has made amendments to the Indian Penal Code of 1860. The information security issues under the IT Act are the following different sections, that is section number 43, section 65, section 66 and section 72. So now we'll see in detail what these sections will do. Section 43, it is made for the person without the permission of the persons in the change of computer systems, access, downloads any data and introduce virus or causes denial of access will be liable for a penalty of 2 rupees 10 millions. Means what section 43 will cover? If the persons without the permission of the authorized person is doing anything illegally in the computer, then he will come under section 43 and he has to pay the fine up to 10 millions. Now section 65, it is a deals with the tampering with the computer source code. Suppose the person is tampering with the computer science documents, according to the 65, anyone who deliberate or purposely hides, or they are doing purposely hiding the or destroying or alerting any computer source code, or they are doing someone else to do shall be punishable with the imprisonment, is what they will get jail up to 3 years with a fine, so which may be up to 2 lakh rupees or both. The person who will comes under the section 65 will have to face the jail up to 2 years and with a fine. Now section 66, it is related to the hacking. So you know what is meant by hacking. Being in computer science, you know what is meant by hacking. So hacking means what? Without the permission, you are going to accessing the data, you are changing something, or you are using their private information, that is called as hacking. So section 66 of the IT Act deals with the issue of hacking. So according to the section 65, hacking is committed if someone with intention of causing wrongful loss or damage to the public, any person destroys or deletes or alters any information which is residing in a computer resources or diminishing its value or utility or affect it injuriously by any means. If person commits hacking, he or she has to face the punishment with imprisonment up to 3 years with a fine, and fine will go up to 2 lakh rupees, or they have to face the both. Now next section come, that is section 72. So this section 72 mainly follows made for the breach of confidentiality and privacy purpose. So here breach of confidentiality and privacy means what? Under the section 72 of the Act, it relates to the disclosure of certain information by any person who has gained access to such information in pursuance of the power granted under the IT Act. In case a person who has secured access to any electronic record, book, register, correspondence, information, document, or other material discloses any of these to any other person, he will be punished with imprisonment for a term which may extend to 2 years or with a fine which may go to 10 lakh rupees. Okay, so this sections mainly made for the IT Act 2000, which is mainly made for the IT information technology purpose, where it mainly focuses on the computer related crimes. Let's see the next question, that is question number 2. What Indian Council Penal Code? It is also called as IPC. So IPC stands for Indian Penal Code, which mainly covers the section 406 and section 420. So whatever you are seeing this IPC and all, just we are concentrating on the computer related crimes or computer related things. So here only we are in IPSC, we only seeing these main two important sections, that is section 406. This is section 406, which is punishment for the criminal breach of a trust. So in case any person who has been entrusted with a property or with any power over any property dishonestly misappropriates the property, makes wrongful use of the property. If the person, without knowing the owner permission, without taking the owner permission, he is sell down the property, or he is doing some dishonestly, misappropriately doing with that property, then this person will come under the section 406, punishment for the criminal breach of trust. They are breaking the trust of the owner. So criminal breach of trust under the section 406 of the Indian Penal Code, whoever commits this criminal breach of trust shall be punished with imprisonment, which may extend to 3 years with a fine, or both. That person has to give the fine, even they have to be stay in the jail. Now the second section in IPC section, that is section 420. You already know, the students, what is any person we call 420, who will call with 420? So 420 person which always the cheating and dishonestly including a delivery of property. So this section 420 of the IPC deals with the cheating cases under the section. Whoever cheats and consistently dishonestly using a person to deliver any property or alter or the something destroying the whole or any part of valuable security will has to face the punishment with the imprisonment, which may extend to 7 years, and shall also be liable with a fine. So these are the mainly two sections you have to explain if they ask what is mean by IPC in a final exam. Okay. Let's see the next question, that is question number 3. What is Consumer Protection Act and who can file a complaint? So you know what is consumer. Consumer is a person who is buying the product. As you know, who is the consumer. So this, for that purpose, the Consumer Protection Act came into force on 15th April 1986 to protect to the consumer from exploitation and to save them from adulterated and substandard goods and deficient services. So now we'll understand what I mean by consumer. So I already explained in the class what I mean by consumer. Consumer means any person who is buying the goods for consideration which has been paid or promised, or partly paid or partly promised. The person who is a consumer, who is buying the product. Now if you are buying any product from the market, like computers, mobile phones, then you are a consumer. Or hires or avail of any services for consideration which has been paid or promised. Then who will file a complaint? Then a consumer can file a complaint. The central government or any state government can file a complaint, or one or more consumers having the same interest, even both they can file the complaint. In case of death of consumer, his legal heir or representative can also file a complaint. Okay. Then what constitutes a complaint? Now what your complaint should be constitutes? If you have suffered loss or a damage as a result of any unfair, restrictive trade practice adopted by the trader, if the goods purchased suffer from any defect, if the service is hired, avail, or suffers from a deficiencies in any respect. So, how you will get the relief available to the consumers? Now you will understand who is a consumer, how they can file a complaint. Now, what relief you will get after filing a complaint? Removal of defects from your goods, even replacement of goods will be there, refund of the price you will get, award of compensation for the loss or injury suffered. So these are relief you will get it from the after filing the complaint. So this is a very important Consumer Protection Act. Even you can see ads in our TV nowadays who will give the awareness about the Consumer Protection Act. It's that ad already I explained, Jago Grahak Jago. So what the Jago Grahak Jago means, if you are buying something, you are paying something, it means that you have the permission to file a complaint against them. Even you can check the weight, whatever they have given on that particular packet. Even you can check the weight, whether it is whatever they have given that kgs and all, it is correct or not. That much you are having the authorities. So that's nothing but it is a Consumer Protection Act. So let's see the next question, that is define cyber crimes. So being in a computer science student, you know you are using a computer, you are there on the internet, you are using the many internet facilities. Now whatever you are doing, you are not open to do anything on the web. Even for that the law has made, the restriction has made. And if you are doing something wrong, you are misusing something, then for that purpose only the cyber crime has made. So the interest is fast, becoming a way of life for millions of people. However, it is a fast being transformed into a heaven of criminals, and the crime rate on the net is increasing every day. So there have been a various kinds of computers and internet related crimes of it. So the most common amongst there is the use of viruses to corrupt or destroy data which is stored in the computer system. So these viruses are attached to the emails, programs, etc. So other form of are frauds, robbery, and forgery also here exist. Even the bogus schemes which is there on the internet, attractive bogus schemes. So there's already robbed many people of the vast amount of money. So these all comes under the cyber crime. So you have to be very careful when you are there on the web market. So which one is the correct one? From whom you should not get fraud. So that are covered by the cyber crime. So here the cyber crimes occurring on the internet is called as a cyber crime. So computer can be subject of a crime by being stolen or a damaged. So in a traditional crimes such as a conspiracy, solicitation, securities, fraud are committed via the internet. So the Information Technology Act 2000 which defines the cybercrime. Who is defining the cybercrime? In the IT Act 2000, whatever they have made, in that only they are defining a cybercrime. Nor uses their expression but only providing the definition about the cybercrime. The crime which is conducted on the computers, those crimes are called as a cybercrime. So cybercrime may be cyber fraud will be there, defamation is there, harassment is there, email abuses or IPR. IPR nothing but intellectual property rights, theft, etc. would not classify as a cybercrime, but broadly stated cybercrime can be said to be an act of commission or omission committed indirectly which is prohibited by any law and for which punishment monetary and or corporal is provided. So for example, if a person through the internet threatens any person with causing death or grievous hurt, so he shall be liable for the offence or criminal intimidation under the section 506 of the Indian Penal Code 1860 and no offence under the IT Act. So the offence would still be classified as a cybercrime as per as broad definition. So this is a cyber crime. Cyber crime means now you understood what is cyber crime. The crime which you are doing by using the computers or by the internet, which will harm the person, then will come under this cyber. And for cyber crime also, the punishments are there in the IPC. Let's see the next question. Explain Indian Contract Act 1872. So what is meant by contract? So first we will understand, it is necessary to understand certain important definitions and principles under the Indian Contract Act 1872. When one person signifies to another his willingness to do or to abstain from doing anything with a view to obtaining the assent of that other to such act or abstains, he is said to make a proposal. So, when a person to whom the proposal is made, it signifies his assent. Thereof, the proposal is said to be accepted. So, what is meant by contract? The contract is made between the two persons. So, a proposal when accepted become a promise. So, these two persons are, one is a promiser and another is a promisee. So, the person making the proposal is called promiser and the person who is accepting that proposal is called promisee. Okay, so now what is mean for that purpose when both parties are involved and legally they are accepting on some terms and conditions and they are doing one contract, that's called Indian contract. So for this Indian Contract Act in the year 1872 they have made law. So when the person to whom the proposal is made, it signifies his assent, thereto the proposal is said to be accepted. A proposal when accepted becomes a promise. The person making the proposal is called the promiser and the person accepting the proposal is called promisee. When at the desire of the promiser, the promisee or any other person has it done or abstained from doing or does or abstain from doing or promises to do or to abstain from doing something, such act or absence or promise is called consideration for the promisee. So every promise and every set of promises forming the consideration for each other. It is an agreement. So promises which the form consideration or a part of the consideration for each other are called reciprocal promise. An agreement not enforceable by law is said to be void. An agreement enforceable by law is called contract. An agreement which is enforceable by law at the option of one or more of the parties thereto, but not at the option of other or others, is a voidable contract. A contract which ceases to be enforceable by law becomes void when it ceases to be enforceable. So what is meant by contract? A contract is made between the one or two persons by the legal. Then only it is called as a contract. If they are talking and living, then it is not a contract. By legally, they have to form, they have to make the rules, they have to follow that rules, and then the contract has made between the two persons. Okay, let's see the next question. That is question number 8. What are the email threats that organization face? So, by using email, organization face several threats. These range from legal threats to network congestion. So now we'll see the next chapter in this unit, that is email policy. So what are the threats we need to face for the emails? So there are different type of threats are there, like legal liability is there, confidentiality breaches is there. So damage to reputation is there, lost productivity is there, network congestion and downtime is there, then email retrieval and court order is there. So by using email organization, we need to face several things. These range from the legal threats to the network congestion. In legal liability, in the most cases, the employer is held responsible for all the information transmitted on or from their systems. As a result, inappropriate emails can result in a multi-million dollar penalties. In last few years, there have been several high-profile lawsuits, such as the case against UK firm Norwich Union, who were forced to pay $450 in an out-of-court settlement after an employee sent an email stating that their competitor, Western Provident Association, in the millions in the financial difficulties. In the US, Chevron settled in case filed by four female employees for $2.2 million. The employees alleged that sexual harassing emails sent through the organization. So whatever each person is filing the case against that, then they have to punish. The next comes the confidentiality breaches. So in the confidentiality breaches, most confidentiality breaches occur from within the organization. So those who are working in the organization, in that organization only, they are breaking the trust, breaking the confidentiality of the regarding to the organization assets or property. Due to that, they should have faced, or organization has to face the severe damage, or they need to loss of some money. Then that is called as the confidentiality of breach. At that time, if any person will find out the breaking the confidentiality of breach, then they will file the case against them. Then damage to the reputation. So there is no doubt that the content of corporate emails reflect on the business. So a badly written emails or an email containing unprofessional remarks will cause the recipient to have a bad impression on the organizations the sender is representing. So UK law firm, that is Norton Rose, had to find this out the hard way when two of their employees originated the Claire Swire email, a sexually explicit email that ended up being read by over 10 million people around the world, especially since the organization in question was a law firm and the employees were attorneys. This email caused severe damage to the reputation. Suppose you are sending to the legal through the emails to the organizations, and due to that your company has financially some is lost, then or company has to face the damage to their reputations in the market, then that is also a threat to the organization. Next will come under the lost productivity. So lost productivity due to an inappropriate use of an organization's emails. So the next we'll see that is a lost productivity. So the lost productivity due to inappropriate use of another organization's email system is becoming a growing area of concerns. In the US, a survey related that 86% of workers use the organization emails to send and receive their personal needs. A recent study also stated that the internal emails make up to 30% of employees' time spent in reading emails. It is concluded that banning email which is containing gossip, jokes, and other time wasting content would save a considerable amount of employees' time. In addition to person emails, unwanted spam messages are huge time waster. The next one we see, that is network congestion and downtime. Spam and personal, that is misuse of emails, can cause organizations' email system to waste valuable bandwidth of resources. Not to mention employee spam, a Gartner Group study held under 30,000 email users found that 90% receive spam at least once a week or 50% get spammed more than 6 times a week. So personal emails cause network congestion since they are not only unnecessary but tend to be made to a large list of recipients and often include large attachments such as MP3, executable or video files that users do not zip. Viruses are also another important area of concerns. If virus hits the organization system, this can cause a network congestion or even a downtime that has to be faced by the organization. The next comes that is email retrieval on court order. So sometimes the email has been retrieved due to the court orders. So it takes more time. Email records are increasingly used in a lawsuits since they tend to contain important evidence. For instance, if your company is faced with wrongful termination lawsuits, chances are that you will be ordered to search all company emails for messages relating to that the person. This is usually not just a matter of quick keyword search. The retrieval often involves restoring thousands of emails on servers and result in a slow and painful search. Worse still, the code could even confiscate your computer as a evidence. Not to mention the fact that the search might uncover some embarrassing evidence you never knew you were safekeeping. If, on other hand, you regularly delete emails as stipulated in corporate email policy guidelines, the code may not force you to do an extensive search since it has enough reason to believe that it will not get any result. So these are the policy or threads which has been made created by the emails to the organization that we need to face. So let's see the next question. Why do you need an email policy? So email policy is a policy means what? The policy is a broader document which is not covers 2-3 pages but it is a huge document where the organization has made the rules and regulations those who are there in the organization from taking a small person till the higher post person, those who are working under the organization. So by having a good email policy in place, you can secure your organization in several ways. Firstly, the email policy will help you to prevent threats. What kind of threats you will face? These are threats which causes a damage to your organization property since it makes your staff aware of the corporate rules and guidelines which is followed will protect your organization. Secondly, an email policy can help stop any misconduct at any early stage by asking employees to come forward as soon as they receive an offensive mail. Suppose the person who is working in organization he has found some any offensive email, then they have to intimate their higher authority that they have found such emails. Then finally, if you are going to use email filtering software to check the content of your employees emails, it is essential to have an email policy. Then you have to take a permission from your employee that you are maintaining their email details. Okay, so that's why you need to create an email policy because it will help the organization to maintain the good environment at their working in place. Okay, next we'll see That is the 10th question. How do you create an email policy? Now only we have seen what is the use of email policy and how to create an email policy. Then how do you create now an email policy? So basically, an email policy should contain all the do's and don'ts concerning the organization email systems. So here we need to work on these all different topics like email risk is what is the best practice of using the email, how the personal usage has been allocated to the employees, what is the wastage of resources, then prohibit contents are there, document retention policy is there, treatment of confidential data is there, email monitoring is there. So this way we need to create an email policy. Now we'll see one by one what is mean by email risks. The policy should list email risk to make users aware of the potential harmful effect of their actions. Advise users that sending an email is like sending a postcard. If you don't want it posted on a bulletin board, then don't send it. Then what is the best practices? This should include email etiquette and writing rule in order to uphold the good reputation of the organization and to deliver quality customer service. Also include instructions on compressing attachment to save the bandwidth. Then personal usage. So the policy should state whether the personal emails are accepted and if so, to what extent you will accept that. You can, for instance, set limits on the amount of personal emails sent each day, or you could require personal emails to be saved in a separate folder. You will probably want to prohibit the sending of chain letters and mass mailings and limit or eliminate certain email attachments from being sent or received. In every case, include examples and clear measures taken when these rules are breached or broken. The next, what is wastage of resources? Warn the users that they are making the use of organization's email system and that they should not engage in non-business activities that unnecessarily tie up network traffic. The policy must also cover the usage of newsletters and news groups. For instance, you can require a user to request permission before subscribing to a newsletter or a news group. Then what content should be prohibited? The policy should expressly state that the email system is not to be used for the creation or distribution of any offensive or destructive messages, including messages which contain offensive comments about race, gender, age, sexual orientation, pornography, religious or political beliefs, national origin or disability. State that the employee who receives any emails with this content should report the matter to their supervisor immediately. Moreover, employees should not use email to discuss competitors, potential acquisitions, or mergers or to give their opinions about another firm. Unlawful message such as copyright infringing emails should also be prohibited. So include examples and clear the measures taken when these rules are breached. The next one is document retention policy. Unless your organization is required to achieve email messages, which is the case for government, healthcare, and financial institutions, it is best to create a policy rule that dictates deletion of emails after a certain amount of days. However, it is good idea to provide an option to save certain emails in a different folder to avoid deletion. If you provide this option, spell out which emails may be saved and which must be deleted. The next one is treatment of confidential data. You know what is meant by confidential data. Confidential data which is being known by only the person and that particular organization who is working on that. So this includes rules and guidelines on how employees should deal with the confidential information and trade secrets. Make employees encrypt any confidential information that is sent via the email and change passwords regularly. Also include measures that will be taken if an employee is found to be sending out confidential information unlawfully. The next one comes, that is email monitoring. How to monitor an email. So if you are going to monitor your employees' emails, you must state this is in your email policy clearly and warn your employees should have no expectation of privacy in anything they create, store, send, or received on the organization computer system, and that the organization may but is not obliged to monitor message without the prior notice of employee. If you do not mention that the organization is not obliged to monitor messages, an employee could potentially sue the organization for failing to block a particular message. So this way you can create an email policy for your employees, those who are working in organizations. So thank you dear students and all the best for your final exams. Thank you.